When it comes to Scott Pruitt, this is an individual who Donald Trump wants to lead the EPA, and unfortunately, this guy should not be in charge of the EPA because he is a climate change denier. He's previously stated that he thinks climate change is a hoax, so thankfully Bernie Sanders came to the rescue, as he always does.
97% of the scientists who wrote articles in peer-reviewed journals believe that human activity is the fundamental reason we are seeing climate change. You disagree with that?
I believe the ability to measure with precision the degree of human activity's impact on the climate is subject to more debate on whether the climate is changing or whether human activity contributes to it.
While you are not certain, the vast majority of scientists are telling us that if we do not get our act together and transform our energy system away from fossil fuel, there is a real question as to the quality of the planet that we are going to be leaving our children and our grandchildren. So you are applying for a job as administrator for the EPA to protect our environment. Overwhelming majority of scientists say we have got to act boldly, and you're telling me that there needs to be more debate on this issue and that we should not be acting boldly.
No, Senator, as I've indicated, the climate is changing, and human activity.
But you haven't told me why you think the climate is changing.
Well, Senator, the job of the administrator is to carry out the statutes as passed by this body and to comply
Why is
with
the climate changing?
Senator, in response to the CO2 issue, the EPA administrator is constrained by statutes.
I'm asking you a personal opinion.
My personal opinion is immaterial.
Really?
To the job of
You are going to be the head of the agency to protect the environment, and your personal feelings about whether climate change is caused by human activity and carbon emissions is immaterial?
Senator, I've acknowledged to you that the human activity impacts the climate.
Impacts.
Yes.
Scientific community doesn't tell us it impacts. They say it is the cause of climate change. We have to transform our energy system. Do you believe we have to transform our energy system in order to protect the planet for future generations?
I believe the EPA has a very important role at regulating the emissions.
You didn't
of
answer
CO2.
my question. Do you believe we have to transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to do what the scientific community is telling us in order to make sure that this planet is healthy for our children and grandchildren?
Senator, I believe that the administrator has a very important role to perform in regulating CO2.
Can you tell me, as I think all of us know, Oklahoma has been subjected to a record-breaking number of earthquakes. Scientists in Oklahoma, or scientists say that Oklahoma is almost certain to have more earthquakes with heightened risk of a large quake probable to endure for a decade, and that the cause of this is fracking. Can you point me, picking up on Senator Harris's discussion with you, can you point me to any opinion that you wrote, any enforcement actions you took against the companies that were injecting waste fracking water?
Senator, let me say I'm very concerned about the connection between activity in Oklahoma.
And therefore, you must have taken action. I guess, can you tell me who you fined for doing this, if you're very concerned?
The Corporation Commission in Oklahoma is vested with the jurisdiction, and they've actually acted on that.
And you have made public statements expressing your deep concern about this.
We have worked through our...
You have made public statements. You're in a state which is seeing a record-breaking number of earthquakes. You're the Attorney General. Obviously, you have stood up and said you will do everything you can to stop future earthquakes as a result of fracking.
Senator, I've acknowledged that I'm concerned about...
You acknowledge that you are concerned. Your state is having a record number of... Well, if that's the kind of administrator for the EPA, your state's having a record-breaking number of earthquakes, you acknowledge you are concerned. If that's the kind of EPA administrator you will be, you're not going to get my vote.
So I love that Bernie Sanders grilled him and even laughed at him, because what he said there was ridiculous. He did concede on the point that climate change is occurring, but if you notice what he did there, he wouldn't admit that climate change was anthropogenic, because if you admit that human activity causes climate change, then you also implicitly admit that we can do something about it. But if you admit the climate is changing and it's out of our control, then why would you legislate to stop the climate from rapidly changing? So that's the logic here, and this is really the state of the new climate denial movement. And this guy is a master in obfuscation of the truth, but Bernie Sanders was onto his bullshit and did not let him get out of it. He also showed us that he has no regard for the earthquakes caused by fracking in Oklahoma. And this is his state. You're the attorney general of this state, and you don't seem to be that concerned that fracking causes earthquakes. You're going to be the leader of the EPA. So I'm inclined to believe that Scott Pruitt is the worst possible choice. But Donald Trump, he's not going to throw us a bone in any way, shape, or form. The people who I would have hoped Donald Trump would have appointed to lead certain government departments were Ron Paul. I don't agree with them on everything, but at least they're more reasonable. Tulsi Gabbard, I wish that she would have been Secretary of State. But unfortunately, he chose the worst of the worst. And unfortunately, if we reject these people, well, then we're probably going to get someone who's is equally bad, if not worse. So we're going to be stuck with someone who's a climate change denier, regardless if we like it or not. A climate denier who thinks climate change is a hoax will lead the EPA. That's a really difficult pill for me to swallow. It's unfathomable to me, but unfortunately, this is the state of the country. A climate denier will be in charge of the EPA if he's confirmed, and someone who doesn't believe healthcare is a right will be in charge of the Department of Health and Human Services. I'm at a loss for words here. All I can say is if there's any extraterrestrials that are watching us and they're aware of our existence and you are planning on intervening, now is the time to do it and save us from ourselves, because at this point, we're running the planet into the ground.
Support this podcast by joining the independent progressive media revolution today at humanistreport.com.